Welcome to the Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors are able to talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. Today's guest is Geoffrey Wells, and Geoffrey Wells has written 3 books that he has put together in what he calls the trilogy for freedom. Geoffrey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background. What led you to write the books?
Sure. I was born in South Africa, and I came from an academic family. My father was a professor. My mother is a storyteller and speaks several African languages. And so I was brought up with books, really. And my father read to us, etc. And I had a career in advertising when I left university, and as an art director. And then I immigrated to this country in 1980, where I continued my career for a little while in advertising until I left to go to film school. I attended the American Film Institute in Los Angeles. And then I got into corporate life. And at that time, it was just at the beginning of the electronic age when spreadsheets were beginning to be treated like databases. And so I learned how to code spreadsheets, basically. And that launched a career in IT that lasted almost 30 years. So I went from that to starting a job in research at Disney in the television syndication division. And because I pitched an idea to the CFO of that division of Disney, he promoted me into the IT position, looking after that particular group. I went from there as a director, and then I was promoted to vice president. And then at some stage, I was there for, I think, more than 15 years. I left and I made a bargain with the devil, and I joined the Fox network because they had made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I was there for 7 years as chief information officer for their television station division. So at that point, I was 59 and a half, and I had been writing the first book in my spare time, which wasn't a lot of time. I would get up at 4 a.m, I'd write for an hour, I'd go to work, I would then write for an hour before I went to bed, and so it took a long time to put together that first novel. I said, that's enough, I'm 59 and a half, I can now retire with without any sacrifice. And we moved out of Manhattan, and we came to the end of Long Island to here in Southold, and where I started to concentrate seriously on writing. So it's the short history of my life.
But so many interesting jobs. I think that a variety of experiences is very helpful to a writer. So I'd like you to tell us about these 3 books, the Trilogy for Freedom, because they're 3 very different stories. And then I'd like you to tell us how you weave them together under this one theme.
Sure. So this story really poses the question to the reader. I regard it as a single story divided up into 3. It poses a single question to the reader, which is, how can you have a heroine of a bitter African war end up as an activist for a Long Island wetland many years later? What is that trajectory? And so the first story is called A Fado for the River, and it is an international spy thriller. And it is about a woman who has a secret. At the time when there were 3 warring factions in Mozambique, there was the Portuguese government, there was the military who were overthrowing the government, and there were the natural, the indigenous people who were fighting for their self-determination, and they all were enemies of each other. And the one secret she had that they all needed was on what ship were the arms coming into port with on. And because she worked for African shipping, she knew the freight, the bill of lading and the freight, and she knew how corrupt her boss was, and she put it all together. She had the story. What happens is a kid from South Africa decided with his friend to get out of the restrictive, apartheid and all that stuff, and dying to have some freedom as a young guy. They went to South Africa, they went to Mozambique, and he fell in love with her. And very soon he decided to take a trip up country to see the Limpopo River. He was captured by the terrorists or the freedom fighters, and he had a long conversation and episode with a freedom fighter where he began to understand the other point of view, which is, colonialism is not for us. It doesn't work. And we want self-determination. And so the two sides to the story. And that's, by the way, what I like to write, where you have conflicting alliances, and I don't make I don't take a position one way or the other, but I do open it up to show that there are two sides to the story. Short, cut to the chase, they escape. And the way they escape is he fakes her death through an explosion. And they do escape, but once they're on the other side of the border, their differences become more exaggerated, and they are separated by their differences and never see each other again until he's a much older man. And he's in Lisbon. He's an American executive at this point, and he's blackmailed and accused of murdering her.
This is the second book, right?
This is the first book.
Still.
This is still the first book. And now he's not going to pay, he's not going to be extorted. He's an important executive. He gives up everything to say, I need to finally find out what happened to her, because they were in love. So this, the romantic trope here is, this is a second chance at romance for this man. And so he sets about going, a lot of the story is tracing her footsteps and how she became a double agent, flying missions into Mozambique, where they would drop arms disguised in bags of maize. And the local population would then run to get the food, and the local rebels would overtake them, grab the weapons, and in many cases murder them. There were over 1 million people murdered during 16 years of civil war, what they called civil war, which really wasn't a civil war. It was really a complete collapse of the system, because nobody wanted to take responsibility and everybody wanted power. So that's the first book. Then you cut to the next book with a completely different character in the form of a composer who is Upper East Side. She's well educated, she's privileged, she's Jewish, she's got everything going for her. And she drops her phone in Central Park, and it's picked up by somebody who hands it over to the police. And a couple of weeks later, she's approached by the FBI, who tell her that her compositions, her online compositions on her website, are being used by cyber criminals to trade African ivory. And she's going, what? What's this got to do with me? What possible connection could I have? And, they explain to her that that's the point. You have no connection. And that's why it's such a good cover for them. And they are running major ivory smuggling activities and transactions.
Don't give too much away.
What's
Don't
that?
give too much away.
Okay, yeah,
Want people to read the book.
yeah. Right. And so she's teamed up with an African street vendor from Tanzania, because that's where the warlords are. And they end up in Dar es Salaam and then later in Mombasa. And she, again, has to pose to be buying ivory so that they can bust the warlords who are running the show. And of course, she's captured. She has to witness the slaughter of elephants, and she goes into a coma, and he pops her out of captivity, and she and her partner separate from their handlers. They catch a dhow from Tanzania to Zanzibar, and they fall in love. And that's about as far as I want to take that story.
Good. You're going to give it all away and nobody will read it. You have to just tease them. But
Right.
the books sound wonderful. They really do.
So that's the second book. Should I go on and describe the third book, or?
If you can do it in 2 or 3 sentences, because I have questions for you.
Right. Okay. So that was the second book is a techno thriller. The third book is an eco thriller. So now we cut back to this woman that we met in the first book, who's now married. She emigrated with her student, now husband, and they're in Long Island, and she had adopted a son who was a refugee, and she leaves. And because Allison, who is the composer, was able to read her unpublished blog, he realized she's really left. She has completely disassociated herself from the family. And why is she doing this? Because she believes so strongly that she has to take dire action to save the wetland. And so it's a story of how Allison reconciles mother and son. And in so doing, gives us some hope for the ecological health of the bay.
Right. Okay. You got some wonderful reviews, by the way. I'm going to read one of them. Okay, maybe 2. Okay. Geoffrey Wells has done it again. The Drowning Bay is compelling from beginning to end. This book, the third and last in Wells' trilogy of For Freedom, continues Allison's story as she tries to rebuild her life after her time in prison. She soon finds herself on a suspenseful trip into the world of ecological terrorism. Wells is adept at mixing genres, so there is plenty here for fans of thrillers, suspense, romance, and action. 5 stars. That's a really good review. And while you were speaking, I was thinking to myself the fact that you have a lot of experience in kind of the world of filmdom, so to speak, but also because you're international. I bet that made writing a story that takes place in different places easier than it would be, say, for me. One of my books takes place in Turkey. I mean, I write mystery stories for kids, okay? So it's not as complicated. But I had to go to Turkey to do the research. I mean, because I felt that I had to get the flavor of the country to put it in.
Yeah.
Whereas you have this international background. Does it help you?
Well, I think what it does is it broadens your perspective. As far as putting together the stories, not so much. I mean, a story could be locally based just as well, but because you want to I want to, as a writer, want to take the reader into an exotic, unknown place that you don't see in the headlines. So that everything is new. It's a completely different place. And even today, Mozambique is a relatively isolated country. But it has enormous history um, and of course a unique people, etc. So that's my goal. That international travel or international exposure helps me to write with a little bit more authenticity, I think.
Yeah, I also think that when you set your stories in different countries, you show that the themes of stories and the values pretty much constant from culture to culture. What's good is good, what's bad is bad. And I think that's an important lesson for people who aren't able to travel, to know that
Yeah,
people in other countries kind of have the same ethics as you do. And I like that about traveling, and I like it about reading books from different places.
yeah. Human nature is universal.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't matter what culture you're from.
You
There
have to
are,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go finish what you're saying.
But I think you have to convince some people that that's true, that human nature is universal.
Yeah,
But we're all pretty much the same. So that's what I think is the value of, I know I was a teacher for years. I did not teach English, but it was so important for the students, especially in English, I guess in history and my subject as well, I taught science, to understand the universality of what is right, what is true, and what is good and what is bad. And
right.
that's an important lesson.
Yeah, it's and underlying all of that is a basic belief in the affirmation of life. Unless you're the sort of writer like Sartre, who's nihilistic, and certainly there's a place for those. That's not me though. I cannot write a book without some hope in it. It's soul destroying.
Because I write for kids, I have to I have to put hope in it. At least I feel that way. Um, um, what was I going to say now? What's the best thing for you about writing?
I think once I get to a stage where I'm inside the protagonist's head, and I'm able to think the way she does, I feel then I'm in my sweet spot. Then I want to write more. It becomes very addictive because that character is clear, and I can use the story to bring her character out to the reader. And when I'm in that spot, it's probably the most enjoyable writing I do.
Yeah, I did a program with school kids yesterday, and they asked, it's amazing what insightful questions they ask, but they asked me that question: what was the best thing about writing? And I said, I become the character.
Yeah.
And I can then ask that character, create any adventure I want and go on it. And to me, that's the best thing. I call it the zone. You get into the zone,
Yeah.
and you are the character. You're living what they're doing, and it's great. It's great fun, and I think also can be a very big learning experience to try to be in somebody else's head.
Definitely.
So, for you, what does success mean for writing? You've written these 3 wonderful books. What is success for you when you write something?
Success for me is knowing that a reader enjoyed the experience, enjoyed the ride.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple. It's enormously satisfying to me, and I rate that type of success over and above how many reviews I have, how much money I make. It's if the satisfaction from knowing that somebody else can part with many hours of their time on your behalf to read your story and then feed it back and say, I enjoy this is enormously satisfying. And that's what really motivates me.
Yeah, I agree. It's that, when are you going to write the next one? Not you. I mean, that's when they say
Yeah.
to me, "You just finished your book. When are you going to write the next one?"
Yeah.
That is very satisfying. I self-published, and I basically deal with school kids. So, I'm never going to be a bestseller on Amazon, and I don't really care. But that's what I love too. I love telling a story and then having people enjoy the story. You're absolutely right about that. Um, so what kind of advice would you give to writers? Somebody who hasn't really written a book, but wants to, launch out into that career.
You know, I'm a big proponent of reading craft books. And the most impressionable craft book that I've ever read, and I continue to read, is written by an author called Lisa Kron, Cron, who wrote a book called Story Genius. And my advice to a writer who wants to end up with a book that other people want to read is to read that book and follow all of her exercises. They're not, that maybe sounds a little patronizing, but they are writing prompts. They're not really writing prompts. They are writing guides, I would say, to crafting the story in the right way so that you don't waste time rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, trying to find your story. So there's, with her methodology, there's a lot of pre-writing before you write the first sentence of the first chapter. So that's one of the pieces of advice. And then secondly, from a marketing point of view, to start building up your presence in the marketplace through Goodreads, through a Facebook page, and particularly through a mailing list. And all of those things can be done very cheaply, so that when you eventually are ready to throw it up on Amazon, you can have a period of time where in pre-sales where you are attracting people who want to read your book. And so you can go out and feel good that you at least have a little bit of following that you can build on going forward. But the main thing is, my advice is don't waste your time poking around, hoping for the best, that you're going to find your story. Follow a methodology, and there are many, there are probably hundreds of them, but I've read a lot of them, and the one that I use is written by Lisa Kron, Cron, and it's called Story Genius.
I've heard of that. I've heard of that. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that you should get onto social media pretty much before you release the book, even before you're finished writing the book. I've given this advice myself, because then you're out there. You shouldn't really wait till you get the book in your hand and then say, well, how am I going to market it? Because marketing obviously is the most difficult part of this whole journey.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's not easy.
No, writing the story is fun, publishing is doable, but marketing is the great mysteries of marketing. I think I'm going to write that book, The Great Mysteries of Marketing.
Yeah, that's a good title.
And I also think that your explanation of how you wrote an hour before, an hour afterward, that's discipline. And some people work well with it and some people do not. But we have about a minute and a half left. So it goes very fast, I know. And so what would you like to say in your last minute and a half on the writer's dream?
Well, I'd like to thank you for giving me the time. And I'd also I'd like to say, ask anybody who's watching us to look for my new books. I have 2 new books coming up. One is a middle grade mystery, which is what you write, I know, Linda. And it's
I'll interview you again. That'll be fun. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. So that's, I enjoyed the interview and I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and for the people who watch the show, I would like to add that when this show is done and packaged, it's sent to me. I put it on YouTube, so you can see this on. You will live on YouTube forever. And then I take the show and I put it on Cablevision Channel 20, 2:30 on a Thursday. You will appear on Facebook, and you'll probably be featured in my newsletter sometime. So when you do this interview, it seems to live forever. In fact, I joke with people, and I say to them, "It may outlive you, but." I don't say that anymore. I have to go. It's too close to home. So I wish you the best of luck with these books and with the next books. And I can't wait to hear that you are warm enough to swim.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Take care, Geoffrey.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.